Publicly, everyone braced for the storm. A title that many had quietly assumed would go to William's side of the family was, in this dramatized account, given instead to Prince Edward, and the palace watchers settled in for the predictable reaction. Cold statements, frosty briefings, the slow leak of disappointment in Wales circles. Privately, what actually happened was the opposite of a storm, and it's what stunned the palace. Because Catherine's response, in this telling, wasn't resentment. It wasn't a brave face over a private fury. It was something far rarer and, to the people watching, far more unsettling. Genuine grace, warmth toward Edward, not a flicker of grievance, as if the title she was supposed to want had landed exactly where it should. And here's why that stunned everyone more than any protest could have. Grievance would have made sense. Grievance, they'd have known how to read. But serene grace, over a thing you were expected to fight for, that told them something they weren't prepared to understand. Let me tell you how I come at this, because it changes what you take from the next 20 minutes. I watch reactions, not the decisions themselves, but the responses to them, because a person's response to a setback tells you infinitely more about them than the setback ever could. Anyone can be gracious when they win. The character shows in how you handle not getting the thing everyone expected you to want, and in a family where every reaction is studied, the response to a snub is one of the most revealing moments you can witness. So, let me be honest with you up front, the way a lot of channels won't be. This is a dramatized story. What's real is the foundation. Royal titles and honors genuinely are granted at the sovereign's discretion, sometimes to reward long service or balance the family, and Prince Edward genuinely has taken on titles associated with decades of dutiful service. Those pieces are true, but this specific title decision, this specific expectation that it would go elsewhere, and Catherine's specific response, that's interpretation, a story built on how honors actually work, not a leak, not a real event I witnessed. And I want to say one thing clearly. This is not a story with a villain, not Charles making a reasonable decision to honor a loyal brother, not Edward receiving something he's arguably earned through years of quiet duty, not William, who in this telling handles it with dignity, and least of all Catherine, whose grace is the whole point. Nobody here is behaving badly. The drama isn't conflict. It's the quiet power of someone refusing to be diminished by a thing they were expected to resent. Because this was never really about a title going to the wrong person. It was about what Catherine's response revealed, that real security doesn't need a title to confirm it, that grace can be stronger than grievance, and that the most powerful thing you can do with a slight is to be genuinely untouched by it. That's what stunned the palace. Not a fight, but the absence of one, from the one person everyone expected to fight. Keep that contrast in your mind. The storm everyone expected, and the calm that came instead. We start there. Let's take the expectation seriously, because the title itself matters less than what everyone assumed about it. In this family, titles aren't just honors. They're read as signals of standing, favor, and trajectory. So when a significant title is in play, the palace watchers immediately map it onto the power dynamics. Who's rising, who's favored, who's next. And in this account, the assumption had formed that this particular title belonged, by the logic of seniority and future, to William's side. It felt like theirs to receive, which meant that when it went to Edward instead, it wasn't just a decision, it was, in the watcher's eyes, a reordering, a signal that the expected trajectory had been disrupted. And that expectation is the real object at the start of this story, because expectations are what create the drama. If no one had assumed the title would go to the Waleses, its going to Edward would have been a non-event, a reward for a loyal, hard-working royal, entirely unremarkable. It became a snub only because of the assumption that it was owed elsewhere. The slight existed in the gap between what people expected and what happened. So picture the moment the decision lands, in this telling. The palace watchers immediately reach for their template. A title the Waleses wanted has gone elsewhere. Therefore there must be tension. Therefore watch for the reaction. They've seen this play out 100 times. The expected script is grievance, managed through frosty briefings and cold body language. Everyone knows their role. And here's the quiet trap in that expectation. Because the moment everyone is braced for grievance, grievance becomes the weak response, the predictable one, the one that confirms you cared, that you counted on the title, that your standing depended on it. To react with resentment would be to admit that the title had power over you. It would hand the watchers exactly the story they expected, and reveal that your security was, in fact, conditional on getting what you wanted, which sets up the real choice Catherine faced in this account. Not, how do I express my disappointment appropriately, but something deeper. Do I let this decision define me as someone who needed it, or do I reveal that I never did? And her answer to that question is the thing that turned a routine title decision into a moment that stunned the palace. Because she chose the response almost no one expects, and almost no one can pull off. Forget the title itself now. I want to show you the real force in this story, because it isn't a title at all, it's a response. The second object here is grace, the deliberate, secure, ungrudging response to a perceived slight. And in this account, grace turns out to be far more powerful than grievance, because grievance reveals need, and grace reveals security. When you resent not getting something, you confess that you wanted it, that it had power over you. When you're genuinely gracious about not getting it, you demonstrate that it never had power over you at all. And that is a far stronger position. That's the handoff. The title was Object 1, external, granted by someone else, out of your control. Grace is Object 2, internal, entirely within your control, and the thing that actually shifts the power, because the title was Charles's to give. But the response was Catherine's to choose, and in choosing grace, she took the one part of the situation she controlled and used it to reveal something no title could confer. That her standing doesn't depend on titles at all. Here's why that's so much more powerful than it looks, and why it's stunned rather than pleased. A gracious response to a slight is disarming precisely because it removes the slight's power. If Catherine had been wounded, the decision would have worked as a demotion. It would have knocked her down a peg, and everyone would have seen the peg fall. But by being genuinely untroubled, she made the decision fail as a demotion. You cannot demote someone who doesn't derive their standing from the thing you withheld. The title went to Edward, and Catherine's actual position, her real standing, rooted in public trust and her own security, didn't move an inch, which revealed that it had never been resting on titles in the first place. And that's the unsettling part for the watchers. They operate on the assumption that everyone in that family is playing the title game, competing for status through honors and precedence. Catherine's grace revealed someone who isn't playing that game at all, because she's already won a different, deeper one. And a person who has opted out of the game you thought everyone was playing is genuinely disorienting. You can't wound them with the weapons you know. You can't read them by the rules you understand. So the real question this raises is, where does that kind of security come from? Because grace like that isn't performed. It's the visible surface of something solid underneath, and that something is the heart of this story. Now let me argue against my own story, because you deserve it, and because anyone who won't argue against themselves shouldn't be trusted. Here's the strongest version of the other side. You could say I'm building an entire cathedral of grace as strength on top of what may be pure performance. That a public figure looking serene about a slight isn't necessarily secure. They may just be extremely well media trained, hiding real disappointment behind a practiced calm, exactly as the job requires. And you could add, fairly, framing Catherine's composure as this profound spiritual security is the kind of flattering read that fans project onto a favorite, when the truth might simply be that she's a professional doing her professional face. That's a fair objection, and I won't wave it away. There's a real difference between genuine equanimity and skilled performance, and from the outside they can look identical. It's entirely possible that behind a gracious public response was private disappointment, managed the way royals are trained to manage everything. To insist it was authentic inner security rather than excellent discipline is to claim knowledge of an interior I don't have. And there's something a little too neat about a story where the sympathetic figure isn't even hurt. But watch what that objection doesn't actually change: the strategic and moral reality of the response, whichever it was. Because even if the grace was partly performed, choosing to perform grace over grievance is itself the powerful, mature move. Whether Catherine felt untouched or merely chose to act untouched, she still declined to hand the watchers the grievance narrative, still refused to confirm the title had power over her, still took the stronger position. The outcome, a slight that failed to diminish her, holds either way. Authentic security and disciplined grace produce the same result: a person who cannot be demoted by what she doesn't chase. So I can hold both. Maybe it was deep inner security, maybe it was superb composure over real disappointment. But in a sense it doesn't matter, because the wisdom is in the choice, not the feeling. The response that reveals need is grievance. The response that reveals strength is grace. And she chose the second, which is admirable whether it came from serenity or from discipline. And where a response like that comes from, genuine or chosen, is worth understanding. So let's talk about where a response like that comes from. Because grace under a public slight, whether felt or chosen, rests on something, and understanding that something is the point. Consider what Catherine's actual position rests on, in this account. Not on titles. On something the title game can't touch. Public trust. A secure marriage. A clear and unshakable role as the mother of a future king and the future queen herself. Her standing is guaranteed by the deepest structures of the institution and by years of earned public affection. None of that depends on whether one particular honor goes to her side or to Edward's. She is, in the most literal sense, already secure in the things that matter most, which means peripheral titles simply can't threaten her. And that's the foundation grace grows from. It's very hard to be genuinely ungrudging about a slight when your standing feels fragile, when you need every title, every honor, every marker of status to shore up a position you're unsure of. But when your core position is unassailable, the peripheral markers lose their power to wound. You can let them go, even give them away with a smile, because they were never load-bearing. Catherine, in this telling, can be gracious about the title precisely because she doesn't need it. Her security is structural, not decorative. There's a deeper layer, too. The people who most crave titles are often the ones least secure in their belonging, who need the external marker because the internal certainty isn't there. And the reverse is also true. The surest sign of real security is the ability to not need the marker. So Catherine's grace, in this account, isn't just good manners. It's a quiet demonstration of the deepest security in the family. The person so certain of her place that she can watch a prize go elsewhere without a flicker, because her place was never made of prizes. And that's genuinely rare, and genuinely powerful. In a system built on status markers, the person who has transcended needing them holds a kind of freedom no one else has. They can't be manipulated with honors, can't be wounded with snubs, can't be controlled by the promise or withholding of status. Catherine, being gracious, reveals herself as exactly that person, and that's a formidable thing to be in a family where almost everyone else is still playing the status game. Which brings us to the man who received the title, who deserves his fairness too. Let me be fair to Edward here, and to William, because a story that treats a title only as a Wales prize misses two other people entirely. Start with Edward, because he's the one the framing risks erasing. The title didn't just go to Edward, as if he were a bystander who happened to catch it. In this account, and in reality, Edward has given decades of quiet, unglamorous service to the institution, the kind of steady, uncomplaining duty that rarely makes headlines but keeps the whole thing running. If a title comes to him, it isn't a snub aimed at the Waleses, it's a reward aimed at him, for a lifetime of showing up. To read it purely as the title William wanted is to make Edward a prop in someone else's story, when he may simply be a loyal servant of the crown finally, deservedly honored. Fairness demands we see the decision from his side, not a theft from William, but a recognition of Edward. And William deserves fairness too. In this telling, he handles the decision with dignity, and that shouldn't be overlooked, because it's easy. A man who quietly accepts that a title he might have wanted has gone to a hard-working uncle, without briefing, without sulking, is demonstrating his own version of the same grace as his wife. The Waleses, in this account, respond as a unit, with maturity rather than grievance. That's not weakness. In a family whose conflicts usually play out through leaks and cold statements, choosing not to make a story is its own kind of strength. So this isn't a tale of the Waleses being robbed by a scheming rival. It's a story of a reasonable decision, honoring a loyal royal, met by a mature response. The only conflict is the one the watchers expected and didn't get. Everyone in this account behaves well. Charles balances his family, Edward is rewarded for service, William accepts with dignity, and Catherine responds with grace. The drama is entirely in the anticlimax, the storm that didn't come. And that anticlimax is itself the revelation, because a family that can let an honor go to the person who earned it, without turning it into a war, is a family showing a maturity people had stopped expecting from it. The non-event is the event. The absence of grievance is the story. And what Catherine's grace truly revealed, the thing that stunned everyone, is the last piece. So here's what Catherine's response actually revealed in this account, and it's why it stunned people far more than any protest would have. It revealed that the Waleses have stopped playing the game everyone else is still playing. For years, the palace drama has run on the assumption that everyone competes for status, that titles, precedence, and honors are the currency, and that every royal is quietly keeping score. Catherine's grace announced, without a word, that she and William have opted out of that scoreboard entirely. They don't need to win the title game, because their position doesn't come from it. And a player who calmly walks away from the board you're all hunched over is genuinely unsettling, because it suggests they know something you don't. And what they know, in this telling, is this: real standing can't be granted or withheld by a title. It's built from trust, from duty, from the public's genuine regard, from the structural certainty of their role. Those things are earned and held, not awarded and revoked. So the whole apparatus of honors, so powerful over people who need it, simply has no grip on someone who has the real thing. Catherine's grace revealed that she has the real thing, and therefore that the title decision, which everyone treated as significant, was actually powerless over the one person it was supposed to diminish. That's the quiet earthquake under the calm. It reordered how everyone had to read her. She wasn't a competitor who'd lost a round. She was someone the competition couldn't touch. And that's a far higher position than winning the title would have put her in, because winning would have confirmed she was playing. Not needing to win revealed she'd transcended the game. So the response that stunned the palace wasn't drama. It was the opposite of drama, and that's exactly why it landed so hard. In a world that runs on grievance and status anxiety, the sight of someone genuinely, securely untroubled by a slight is almost shocking. It exposes how much everyone else is driven by need, and how free the person is who isn't. Which brings us to the truth this whole story has been building toward. So let me finally say the thing this whole story has been circling. Why did Catherine's grace stun the palace more than any fury ever could have? Because it proved she never needed the title. And in a world built entirely on needing titles, that made her the most powerful person in the room. Think about the logic of it. In a status system, power is supposed to flow from the markers of status. The higher your title, the greater your standing. Everyone competes for the markers because everyone believes the markers are the power. And then someone demonstrates, calmly, that their power doesn't come from the markers at all, that they can watch a coveted marker go elsewhere and remain completely, genuinely secure. That person has revealed a source of power that sits outside the entire system. And power from outside the system can't be managed by the system. It can't be granted, withheld, or controlled by the people who control titles. It's free. That's what Catherine's grace revealed, in this account, that her real power, public trust, her secure role, her own inner certainty, is entirely independent of the honors game. Which means Charles's decision, however significant it looked, had no leverage over her. You cannot use titles to reward or punish someone who doesn't need them. And that makes her, paradoxically, the least controllable and therefore, in a sense, the most powerful figure in a family where everyone else is still tethered to the scoreboard. So the title that went to Edward was never really the story. The story was what Catherine's response revealed about the nature of her power, that it's the kind no one can give her and no one can take away. Grievance would have revealed a woman who needed the title and didn't get it, a diminished figure. Grace revealed a woman who never needed it at all, an untouchable one, and the palace, fluent in the language of status, understood instantly which of those is stronger. That's why the calm stunned them more than a storm. A storm would have said, she cared. The calm said, she doesn't have to. And there is nothing more formidable, in a world of people who desperately do, than someone who genuinely doesn't. So here's my honest verdict, and then a question, and then I'll let you go. Everyone braced for a whale's grievance. Almost no one was ready for grace. And grace, it turned out, was the stronger move by far. Because in a family that runs on titles, the person who reveals she doesn't need them is the person the whole system can't touch. Catherine's calm wasn't defeat. It was the quiet announcement that her power comes from somewhere titles can't reach. Strip away the drama, if you like. Doubt the specific decision, doubt the expectation, take only what's real. Honors granted at the sovereign's discretion, a hard-working royal in Edward, and a Wales family whose standing rests on far more than any single title. Even the plain version holds the lesson this story tells, that the response to a setback reveals more than the setback, and that genuine security shows itself not in what you win, but in what you can lose without being diminished. Nobody in this is a monster. In fact, nobody behaves badly at all. Not Charles, balancing his family and honoring loyal service. Not Edward, rewarded for decades of quiet duty. Not William, accepting with dignity. And not Catherine, whose grace was the whole point. The only antagonist here is the expectation itself, the assumption that everyone must be playing the status game, and the disorientation of watching someone reveal they've stopped. So here's my question, and I mean it, because I read the replies. Think about the last time you didn't get something you were supposed to want. A promotion, a recognition, a place you felt was yours. Did your response reveal need or security? Because this story's real lesson isn't about titles. It's that the most powerful thing you can do with a slight is to be genuinely untouched by it, and that grace, real grace, is the surest sign that your worth was never resting on the thing you didn't get. Tell me below, not for the algorithm. Because underneath the palace, this is really a question about where our sense of worth actually lives. In the titles we're granted, or in something no one can grant or take away. Everyone waited for the storm. What stunned them was the calm, and slowly understanding that the calm was the strongest thing in